As always, a huge thank you to Starboard, who are once again this season's main sponsors. Starboard has a history of innovation across water sports, starting in 1994 by revolutionising the design of windsurf boards, and they've brought that bang up to date recently, bringing foil windsurfing onto the Olympic stage with their IQ foil package. Starboard got behind stand-up paddleboarding in a huge way in the early days and continue to lead the industry to reduce their environmental impact. Their focus on innovation brought them 7 world champions at the ICF Worlds last year, and all of them were using their Lima paddle range. They continue to improve and innovate their boards and their paddles for all abilities across all flavours of the sport, including adventure. And you can find out more about Starboard through their website, which is linked to in the show notes. Welcome to SUPfm, it's Simon here, and if you've got this far then you'll know that this mini-season has been all about Yukon 1000, the longest paddle race in the world. So our previous episode was from the start line in Whitehorse, and ahead of the final concluding episode in this season, we've got this as a little offering for you. I asked the SUP teams and also a canoe team that we had developed a bit of a connection with before the race to give us their immediate take on the 2023 race, to give us that top-level taster of what it was like to compete, and to get an idea of what it was that they had taken from the race this year. So if you haven't listened to the other episodes yet, I'd recommend you listen to those ahead of this one, because you'll probably get a better sense of where they've come from to get to this point. I hope this is also a good fix for those of us who have been following the race over the full 9 days. And the prize for the best social media comment this week was the person who said, "Who knew that following coloured dots on a screen for 9 days could be so much fun?" And that's absolutely true. But now we get to hear from some of those teams who we've been following. So this is very much a quick and dirty episode update recorded exactly where the paddlers just happen to be following the race, and it features those paddlers you'll already know from previous episodes. So we've got Martin from the Renegade Moose Chasers, Craig and Skip from Team Shack, and also Dan and Nick from the canoe team Fortune Favours the Brave. And you can hear in all this audio their physical and mental exhaustion, and probably a need to do some processing and reflection. But what I also heard in there was that they've made a real connection with their individual essences. They've almost gone through a religious experience, and there was a clear sense that everyone's gone on quite a personal mental journey as well as a physical one. And it certainly seems that they've been changed by their experience. And I'm not just talking about the 6 kilos of weight that Craig has lost over the 8 days that he was on the course. So let's start with Martin of the Renegade Moose Chasers, who left me this message less than 24 hours after he had finished the race.
Oh, good morning, Simon. It's Martin Rendell here from the Renegade Moose Chasers, fresh off the back of the Yukon 1000. Where do I start with this one? We're back into Fairbanks now. So we finished at the Dalton Highway Bridge yesterday in 9 hours. Sorry, 9 hours, I wish. 9 days, 7 hours. And I can honestly say it's going to take a long time to physically recover, and also I think mentally recover from it. It is, it's penned as the world's longest and toughest paddle race, and it has very good reason to have that title. When you are out on that river, we started in Whitehorse on, I don't even know what date it was, last Friday, and you are out on that river totally alone for, in our case, 9 days, 7 hours. And when I say totally alone, Simon, it's you do not see another living person for the entirety unless you see another racer team out there. It's vast. It's known as the last frontier for a very good reason, because there is nobody there. There is nobody lives there apart from the small villages, which are very few and far between. The river is a monster. It's like something you've never seen ever in your life before. Absolute monster. on average, it's 1 kilometre to 1.5 kilometres wide. Now, if you just think about the amount of volume of water, 1,000 miles at a minimum of 1 kilometre wide, it's just mind-boggling. So when Kim and I were paddling across there, I swear to God, you could see the curvature of the earth on the water. You're paddling across the water, and the water line in your vision, it bends. A bit like when you look at the earth, and it's got you're looking out to sea, and you can see from 180 degrees, if not more, and it's got a slight curvature to it. That's what the river is like. It's sided by mountains constantly until you get all the way to the dreaded flats, which is like, the flats are like a plateau, and again, it's just moving water at, in some cases, 5 kilometres wide. I can't tell you, Simon, it just, trying to put what I saw into words is, I don't know, it's going to take a long time for me to process this. We had some real highs, and the highs were the nature, and so just being surrounded by those mountains and being, for you to feel so absolutely tiny and small and insignificant, is amazing. Nature. I thought we would see so much more nature. We saw black bears. We saw black bears on maybe day 7, and on our final day, literally on our run in down to the finish, we had like 2 or 3 miles to go, and there was a family of there was a mother and 2 cubs. On the side of the bank there, we saw some moose. We saw a mother and 2 babies swimming across the river right next to where we were camping. We saw some eagles. We saw some beavers. It was an amazing place for nature. How do I feel myself? I am physically and totally blown. 18 hours of being on a board. Now, I measured this space. My leg length is 34 inches long. And if I sat on the board with my back against my rear bag, my front feet were just to the sides of my front bag, that is the space you've got. You've got 34 inches of space to sit on for 18 hours a day. Sit or stand, because obviously we were sitting a little bit because it's way tiring to stand for the whole time. So 18 hours a day on 34 inches of board space. And then you get off. You unpack all of your kit. You find a camp, which could be a sandbar, a gravel bar, just trying to find somewhere that is elevated off the water. It's hopefully free of mosquitoes, which they were abundant. I think they were the most nature we ever saw and felt, actually. Bloody mosquitoes. So you camp, literally you grab your bag, you put the tent up, you get your food on, you eat your food, you go to bed, and then 3 hours later you are awake again, and then you're doing it all in reverse. So in 24 hours we were having 3 hours sleep. So we had 30 hours sleep in the 9 days, 7 hours. So sleep deprivation is an absolute crazy one. I was making up all sorts of things. I was seeing things in rock faces, in trees. I was even seeing faces in the water at one point. Dangerous too, actually. We got to a little time around about maybe sort of 10 in the morning, maybe about somewhere between 8 and 10 a.m. where we called it sleepy time, because you've been up since around 4, you've been paddling, and then all of a sudden your body goes into sleepy time mode. And so if you're too tired, you're nodding off. I was actually nodding off paddling. My eyes were closing, my head was nodding. So I sat down, and then you're paddling, and then your arms are going through the motions, but they're not doing anything. And then the next thing you know, you wake yourself up because you're about to tip yourself into the water because you fell asleep. Sleep deprivation is something that only, I think, the Yukon 1000 can give you. I don't think you can get sleep deprivation. You can't sort of like self-administer sleep deprivation. Absolutely crazy. But no, Simon, we've had the most amazing adventure. And I think my brain just is not in the modern game at the moment. So, but I've had a very quick flick through all of the support and all of the messages and everybody getting behind the Brit teams. You know, Craig and Skip did absolutely amazing. They flew off from the start, and we didn't see them again after day one. So, you know, those guys were absolute machines today, and hats off to them for the time and that they got, for sure. But just massive support to thank yous to everybody that gave us the support. Scanning through a few pages and a few messages, I can't believe just how many people got on board with us, the Brit teams. So a huge thank you from the Moose Chasers to everyone who supported not only us but to the Brit teams in general. So I'm sure we can have a little catch up when we get back, Simon. We're in Fairbanks here until, I believe, Friday. Fly back to the UK Friday, land Saturday. So next week I'm sure I will be back at home feeling a lot more compos mentis and maybe a little bit more accepting of the modern world. But right now I'm going to stay in the woods for a little while. Anyway, all the best, Simon. Thank you also for your support. And it's been an amazing journey, and we will catch up very, very soon. You take care and speak soon. Cheers. Bye.
So the next part features Fortune Favours the Brave. Now, we don't normally let canoe teams on here, but they did most of their training on SUP, so we're willing to forgive them and stretch a point here. But in all seriousness, as inexperienced paddlers, this duo of veterans started slowly on the racecourse and then got stronger and quicker as the days passed. And they were also really generous, supplying us with photos and videos from the start line. But they also took some truly spectacular sunset photos of Team Target Azalea, Ashley Kane and Gary, which are absolutely beautiful and which they talk about in this piece. And we'll link in the show notes to the Instagram feed of Mr. Ashley Kane, where you can check out both the photo and also the story of a truly inspirational man and his work to combat childhood cancer.
Good afternoon, Simon. It's Dan and Nick. We're currently in Seattle Airport waiting for our connection back to London Heathrow. You asked about thoughts on the race. I would say that it was incredible. It was brutal. For us, with only 5 hours paddling experience, it was all about learning on the go. And hopefully we showed that with limited paddling experience, but a bit of ability to administrate yourself and to work in the darker times, you could do quite well. It was great to be involved in the whole event. The challenge is immense, and I think one of the greatest things about the race is the community, especially those who've been through it, and the support that they give, especially to absolute amateurs like us, was amazing.
Yeah, I'm sitting here now and feeling pretty exhausted, if I'm honest. It's been a significant physical and mental undertaking. And I think it's probably one that, you know, it will take a bit of time for the reality to really embed, and also maybe some of those learnings or takeaways that, you know, we should always take from situations to really bring themselves to the fore. What's clear at the moment, and actually having got to this position, is just understanding, you know, the enormity of the task and the superhuman effort that goes into it. I think to paddle 18 hours a day is one thing, but to do so not getting off your boat all day, to sleep, you know, for the best part of bugger all each evening, and to go again and again and again is like nothing I've heard of or seen. And it really is a huge challenge to people mentally, you know, physically, and the enormity of that task can't be underestimated. So yeah, certainly feeling somewhat tired, lackadaisical, lethargic, and needing to reflect more on those. But it's been an incredible journey, as Dan said. Met some wonderful people. The last couple of days we've spent in Fairbanks since we got back. You know, we've caught up with some of the other teams, had a nice time socially, and it's a sort of esprit de corps that's manifested itself from the event.
So for the highlights that I put, I think it was on day 2, we were coming through the fog, and we spot something on the horizon. We're not sure if it was a log, if it was an elk, but we definitely saw it was moving. We paddled closer, at which point we were pretty sure it was a bear. And being the type of characters we are, we carried out immediate action drill, which was to get our cameras on and to get a bit closer. So it was lovely to see a black bear, probably about a year or 2 years old, swimming from left to right, and then as it spotted us, it went back to the home bank, and up it went and off. And so that was definitely one of the highlights. Another one would be spending time with Nick. He's a great guy, and just getting to learn a lot more about him. Hopefully he's definitely built a incredibly strong relationship that will last a lifetime. For both of us, it was a total digital detox. We got our phones out, but that was to take pictures and maybe take a note here and there. So that was really good, and I didn't feel like I missed my phone. I don't know about you, Nick.
No, I didn't, and I think, as Dan said, it's been such a privilege, Dan, to do this with you. And I think one of the main takeaways, really, from a positive perspective, is, I don't think we had any choice words with each other. It's probably because neither of us talk much, although you talk. There was no one for you to talk to on the water. That was
no, but I actually think you talk more than I do in hindsight. No, you did call me bossy one night.
You are bossy.
I was bossy because we didn't want to.
He's bossy, full stop.
We didn't want to pitch our tent next to somebody who'd already been in for half an hour and who were going to wake us up when they were getting ready in the morning half an hour earlier.
You're not bossy. As long as everyone does what you want, you're not bossy.
That's fair enough.
Do what you want.
Do you want to take the lead on this, or do you want me to?
No, you take the lead.
Then there was the other highlight, which for some people will be a low light, but because of our sort of slightly strange sense of humour, was it started to rain, and Nicholas said, "Is it time to put our Gore-Tex on, our waterproofs on?" And I was like, "No, it's going to blow over." At which point the heavens opened.
Biblical.
And it was the heaviest rain. Well, it wasn't just rain, it was hail that just thundered down. And
it hurt.
At which point he said, "Is it time, am I allowed to now put my Gore-Tex on?" And I said, "Okay, but I think it's a good time."
It was a bit late by then.
It was a bit late, so we were quite wet, but that was definitely a highlight because we knew that others would have been not seeing the funny side of it.
Yeah. And and it's those moments, those human adversity and that camaraderie that you share that really foster those relations. And Dan and I came into this with a strong relationship already, but I think we leave even stronger, and a real mutual admiration and respect for each other and where we are in lives. And I think that's really powerful from a friendship perspective. And actually, when you look at it that way, it has really propelled it forward, brought us even closer still. I think on the flip side to that, there's certainly a challenge in that, in the sense that I think picking your partner for this race is really key. One of the takeaways I talked about when we look at this earlier is having the back of your teammates, and I think that's really important in life. Whoever's on your team in life, partners, spouses, friends, family, and actually we get to pick those that's on our team, so it doesn't have to be an extensive list, but Dan's firmly on my team, and you just don't let someone down on your team. And I think it's that dogged determination and ruthlessness to succeed. I had a really challenging day on day 2. No matter how much I probably thought I didn't want to be there, I'm never going to let Dan down, because actually that's what it's about. And I think that resilience carried us through. But I would question and wonder for others if it maybe wasn't the same. And so I think picking someone to conduct the race with is really important, because it's not necessarily about who's the strongest paddler or whatever it may be. It's also understanding how they're going to act in situations. One of the things we didn't realise was, I'm now going to call it stern, but I've only just realised that the stern means front of the canoe, is that you really...
No, that's the back.
Oh, bow. Sorry. Yeah, see, we're clearly pros here. I'm just going to go back to front and back. So at the front, you can't really turn the canoe, which means the person at the back is pretty much always having to do something. And so there were days when, I'd go have a quick sleep or something, and I'd try my best to replicate or do the same for Dan, but actually it's so hard to do so, because ultimately I'd end up spinning around and you need the person at the rear to steer. And to do that, but knowing there's not a resentment, but at the same time knowing that you'll pull your weight, and in lieu of that, you're going to do this, that, or the other to try and accommodate it. I think it's really important, because otherwise those niggles will build, and you can see it. There's clearly relationships and people as partners who've been tested throughout this race, as many that have gone before. And for me, picking the right partner to do this race with is huge, because ultimately you win and lose together. And I think that was one of the things we really looked at, that the winning is great, but the losing or not completing is hard, because each of you have different drivers, stakeholders and so forth. And so you've got to be aligned in that outcome. So a bit of a sidetrack waffle from me, but backing those on your team, and a real thanks to Dan, because it's been an absolute pleasure to go on this journey with him, and feel closer than ever, which is such a lovely position to come out from this, where others haven't maybe fared so well.
I think one of the things for you that we discussed earlier was about purpose and about giving and giving back. And I think one of the highlights was definitely after the race. Do you want to talk through as we caught up with a certain crew?
Yeah, so we were paddling along one evening. We caught up with one of the teams, with Ashley and Gary from behind, and just in front of them there was this vibrant orange sky, sunset, and actually you don't really see much of it because of the light being up so long. But noting the purpose and focus on Team Azalea, and the backstory there's a real powerful element in the colour orange, and it shining down on them in that moment. And Dan and I saw this and started grabbing the camera, and Dan said, we need to take this picture. And I grabbed the camera and started taking this picture as we were going past them. And I think they thought we were sort of not talking to them, but it was just this moment that we had to capture. So, about 30 photos later of trying to just make sure it was the right one, it felt lovely. And Dan and I looked at it in the tent that night and went, that's the picture. And it's interesting that, we then met Ashley and Gary when they came off, but after Ashley had done his initial interview, we showed him this picture, and you could see the sheer emotion that hit him, with his daughter looking down on him, and casting him in a sea of orange. And it was a very vivid moment and poignant moment, whether people are religious or not, but almost this enlightening, profound moment that someone was looking over them and supporting them and carrying them on the journey, and that being the person at the centre of his cause and world. And so I think you could tell how much that meant. And I think by that I talk about, and my wife often says this, be the person your dog wants you to be. They don't want much, they want a bit of a pat when you go past, taken out for a walk and what have you, and just being a continuous presence and picking up on the small stuff, but also giving to others without expectation. And I think I speak for both of us, certainly took more joy from that one moment than maybe anything else, to see the emotion that it meant to Ashley when we were able to send that to him. So I think a real high, and certainly something I won't
things
forget.
Like giving people some coffee because they were flagging, or it was
not your terrible coffee.
Not my terrible coffee, but that did work. They did upgrade to better coffee when they found it.
Just to put that into effect, Simon, and for anyone listening, Dan decided that rather than boiling up coffee throughout the day when he got tired, we were on the army ration packs, where it's called 3-in-1, so it has like creamer, sugar and coffee in a sachet. Dan decided just to pour it into his mouth and chew this mix of freeze-dried coffee, creamer and sugar, which certainly had the right effect. But having tried it myself, I think I would have had it cold. Sorry, segue.
It was a segue, but actually I thought it was right.
It was horrific. It won't be catching on anytime soon.
It broke up the monotony of the time. So talking about dark times was a lovely cut across from eating coffee. So for me, the two sort of dark times were the area called the Flats. So the first part is around navigation and getting through that. And Nick did an amazing job with some mapping from Southampton University to navigate through that. And then as you get to the top, or what feels like the top because you're heading north, the navigation gets easier, but the river slows even more and it felt like treacle at times, and you're paddling away, the sun is beating down on you, it is reflecting off the sort of milky white water, and that it's hot, you're paddling slowly, it's in the middle of the day, you're on a low, and just that slow flow rate just makes it so monotonous. And the long, not even sweeping bends, the bends that meander back on themselves ready to form oxbow lakes, that was definitely for me the darkest time.
That was but you know what, in adversity sometimes there's positives, and I also had one of my most enlightening moments during that phase, where spending some time with Zach and Paul, our good friends from Montana now, as we were paddling along, and we were sort of almost at some stage, it just turned into a float trip where I don't think we could paddle anymore, and the four of us had kind of laid back in the canoes and were just nudging ourselves forward. But in that moment, it really almost came back to me with Amanda saying, look, remember to enjoy it as well. And I think in that moment, there was a period that sort of snapped and said, hey, enjoy it. You know, you're here, make the most of it. And I think it was one of the dark moments, but actually within it, there was also a really positive for me moment of sort of a defining moment of saying, actually, no, you know, you're here for yourself, enjoy it, and, you know, have that experience. So, yeah, quite profound again, really.
Any other dark times?
Any other dark times? John playing with the exercise.
So, yeah, Nick and I, both with our military background, in military exercises, there's a base level of an exercise and what they want to be practiced and exercised, what training objectives need to be achieved. And then there's an element where you can increase the complexity, or you can add different elements to make it tougher if the troops are doing well. And I know John definitely got into Nick's head, because it felt like John was there playing with the dials to try and make it tougher at times.
Yeah, and I can see John taking great delight in this. So if you're reading this, if you're listening to this now, John, you know it's the case too. I imagined you with your little, I don't know what I want to call it, a tablet with a dial. It'd obviously be techie. And as we were sort of coming towards the finish, we'd left sort of this flat section, and you just thought, oh, we're there, we're going to turn this bend and it's a straight all the way and we'll get some pace. But rather than it being this lovely smooth finish, John had turned up the dial to this maximum amount of just creating this bubbling pot of water, which was actually quite dangerous, as one of the other teams said. And, you know, between wind and current, it was just absolutely rocking. And I could swear it was John on his tablet dialing it up just to finish off the exercise and that final moment of cranking up the pressure. So the biggest takeaway for me in spending time with Nick, and we have a very good relationship. I've learned a hell of a lot from Nick. I knew he was an amazing father to Mila and Ella, and just talking through different things is something that's really struck me, that the importance of family and spending quality time with our children. But in this case, I need to spend more quality time with my children. We talked about that digital detox. It's for me, it's and hopefully my wife will hold me to this, it's around being present. It's around not having your mobile phone on when I'm watching my son football training, that I am watching and I'm not on my phone. And when I'm with my daughter, gymnastics, exactly the same. Or if I'm hitting a tennis ball with them, it's being there, it's being present, it's being goes back to the sort of the dog, being the person that your dog wants you to be. So yeah, enjoying their childhood. So that's definitely my biggest takeaway from this. Yeah, and I think, you know, there's huge amounts, as I've spoken about, learned from, and I'm sure there'll be more that come, but, you know, one of them is really, and I was talking to someone about it last night, I was talking to Ash actually about it last night, we've got to break ourselves down at times. to build ourselves better, to come back stronger and be better versions of ourselves. It came at a time for me when I felt I needed it, and the right time, and very apt. Jesus did it for 40 days and nights, went into the desert. This was mine, strip off and, go into the Yukon on our own sort of quest, if you like. And, I felt that it did exactly that, whilst in one hand it sort of stripped things back and stripped elements back, it sort of breaks down and comes back stronger. And I know, I said to my wife and the kids just recently, getting onto the plane, I feel coming home a much stronger person, not just physically, because actually that's certainly not the case at the moment, but mentally, from a mental fitness perspective, I feel much fitter mentally, and much stronger and more resilient, and much calmer, and happier and true to myself. And I think that's a real positive takeaway for me, along with everything else, and the relationship with Dan and all that we've achieved, to go back in that frame of mind, feeling really in a good place, happy and comfortable, relishing, looking forward to seeing the family, but also getting into work and everything else that goes with it. It's ticked the boxes, and I think through adversity you can triumph and achieve wonderful things, and that's certainly very much, the effect that's had there. And last but not least for me, I suppose the other one is also, we've raised quite a few pennies for the charities we're supporting, which will go to beneficiaries and great effect. So to all those who've supported me and, reduce our carbon and down in YPI has been, wonderful. And I think as part of that, one of the things I did was through doing this trip, I offset my lifetime's carbon emissions. So I can now claim to be carbon neutral for life on my scope 1 and 2 emissions. So that felt quite a good undertaking, really. And that's very much the work we've been doing at Reduce Our Carbon, and looking at carbon offsetting, agroforestry with fruit trees and smokeless stoves. So all good stuff, but I'll pass back to Dan. I'm waffling now.
Yeah, so it goes to purpose. And on day 2, when that was pretty dark, when we had the darker moments in the flats, and you're wanting to give up, and that the only thing you do is do stroke or paddle stroke by paddle stroke to go forward towards the finish line, and you don't want to let your
500,000 apparently.
Yeah, we did the maths. We each did 500,000 paddle strokes, so we literally were shoveling water 18 hours a day, apart from the few moments off. But it's around that purpose, and not wanting to let family, friends, and in particular, in our case, our charities down, and all those who've already donated, because that would have really hurt if we had done that, and we weren't going to let that happen. So that was sort of part of the key drivers in those darker moments. And so thank you for all those, especially our families, and our friends who've supported us, and all those who've donated. A massive thank you. And then just sort of really to wind up, you just asked about logistics. So we come under we go through the beautiful countryside, the amazing, seeing different rock strata and the different trees and the wildlife, and then you see a piece of concrete. Never have I been so happy to see a piece of concrete. I actually...
Confusing shaped bridge as well.
It is a confusing shaped bridge. It's not a straight bridge. It's a
wonky bridge.
It's a wonky bridge. I think I did well up. I sort of got a bit teary.
I certainly did.
And we come under there, and John meets you, and he gets you out. You interview. You say a few confused words to him, and then the support team, John's support team of 2 of them, will then help with the canoe. You get it out, start drying your kit. You then are able to go off for a shower, get a burger, and then most people jump in a red minibus. But we were quite lucky. We've made a great friends from Team Freshwater out of Montana, Paul and Zach, and they were absolutely brilliant. And I think we both dragged each other round, even though they beat us.
I think they would have dragged us round.
They would have. Paul was so strong he could have dragged us round. They had lent their truck to drive round to pick up their canoe, and so we were lucky enough to jump in there, beast of a Ram. Was it 500?
Yeah,
huge truck, and
monster truck.
We headed back to Fairbanks. Everyone said it was a 4-hour drive. It felt like it was an hour and a half drive.
That's because you slept the whole way.
Well, that's because you were talking about football. So Nick and I do a bit of a tag team to keep Zach awake. So it was either about football or the guys, they love their hunting. So between us, we could keep awake. And then we got into Fairbanks, and we had an amazing meal. Had a nice piece of steak. Found our hotel, sorted our kit out, and then sort of went around yesterday.
Yeah.
And then
left with more luggage than I came with. Once again, the team was waiting with.
Nick was tasked by his family to bring back a lot of American specific cooking and
that
eating.
Being Amanda being from America and growing up in Kansas City, and my daughter's been half American by nature of that, so I was tasked with American staples.
Yeah.
It's probably the equal weight to our canoe though, Dan.
Yeah, I think actually Nick makes a really interesting point here. So Nick is not renowned for his packing light.
I just figure I can carry it all.
He's a strong guy, so he can carry it. So I think there were a few of the veterans and other competitors at the start line almost going, who are these two guys? How on earth have they filled 2 large bear barrels up with food? There's a rumour going around that we took a slab of Gatorade with us. That's actually
true.
Nick had drunk 2 of the bottles beforehand. I think it was when we actually had done the first of these.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're known for taking a lot of kit
I had
around.
a couple of 2-litre bottles of Coke as well.
Yeah, 2 bottles of 2. We thought they might be useful bottles to put purified water into.
I took a pizza the first day too.
Yeah, pizza.
Yeah, we did all right.
We got through. So we had a nice night in Fairbanks, and we flew at 0200 this morning from Fairbanks in Seattle, and now we're waiting in Seattle in the airport, ready to fly home in about 3 hours. I think that's about us really. I'm looking forward to seeing our families.
Yeah, yours are there, aren't they, to meet you?
Hopefully.
Very exciting.
Hopefully, if not, it's another taxi. If not, you might have to give me a lift home. Anyway, Simon, I hope that is probably longer than you were hoping for, but you can always cut out most of it, probably most of Nick's waffle, and
oh yeah, you'll get nothing but waffle from me,
and nearly all of me, and it'll be good. Right.
So thank you to Fortune Favours the Brave as they waited for their flights from Seattle. And next we hear from Team Shack. And Craig and Skip completed the race before returning back to where it all started in Whitehorse, Yukon, before preparing to fly back to the UK. So here's Skip just 2 days after finishing the race with his thoughts.
Hi Simon, it's Skip here from Team Shack Yukon 1000. Just wanting to send you a message to really finish up the journey that I've been on over the last 4 years. My journey started in 2019, and I'm now sat on a bench where I was sat this time last year after having to have pulled out of the Yukon 1000 race for the reason that my partner caught COVID a couple of days before the race. I'm sat on a bench where on that day, full of emotion and disappointment, I wrote a song called North of Ordinary, and kind of during that process I vowed to myself to come back to this spot and do the race known as the Yukon 1000. I have now completed that journey. I have now fulfilled that dream of paddling 1,000 miles from where I'm sat here now in Whitehorse at the edge of the Yukon River, all the way to the Arctic Circle and back out again into Alaska, where at the Dalton Highway Bridge the race finishes. And I guess what I'm wanting to do is to express my gratitude for being able to have come back and complete that dream and hope, and to prove that to myself that I have resilience and strength within me that was greater than I ever expected. And the Yukon 1000 race put me on a journey where I learned an awful lot about who I am and what I'm capable of. And the journey was both awe-inspiring and emotional and beautiful and scary and difficult, and as a result of all of those things, sat back here at the beginning where it all started, I'm able to reflect and to realise that I've been on the greatest journey I think I will ever go on, and that it has allowed me to, for once in my life, be proud of something that I've achieved. And I genuinely am proud of what I've achieved, and I'm genuinely proud that the journey was what it was, and that I was able to do it with Craig by my side, as it was meant to be. And I'm thankful to him for all the hours of preparation that he put in, and then the incredible determination to paddle through that 1,000 miles and again be by my side throughout that. I'm also incredibly grateful that our friends and competitors, Martin and Kim, also made that journey, because it gives us a common kind of foundation that no one else has. We were the only two teams to do it this year, and we both succeeded, and we should both, as teams and individuals, be incredibly proud of what we have achieved, because it's not an easy thing to do by any stretch of the imagination, but it is one of the, if not the most wonderful things I have ever done. And I will always look back at this time, this stretch of time, all the 4 years that the journey has taken, with great fondness and now complete happiness that the job is done, and that I'm able to walk away with the knowledge of knowing that I've completed the Yukon 1000, and that we were the first ever UK based paddlers, stand-up paddleboarders, to do this incredible journey and take on this incredible undertaking. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank everyone that supported us, our sponsors, you, friends, family, and all those that we love that stuck by us and allowed us to come back and take on this challenge, and then to ultimately be the first to do that from the UK and win the paddleboard section of the Yukon 1000. Thank you.
And finally, with his thoughts about his race experience, here's the SUP coach, Craig Sawyer.
Hey Simon, so Craig here from Team Shack, Team 1. Currently back now in Whitehorse. We finished the race a couple of days ago, 2-3 days ago, and some good friends drove us back to the start in Whitehorse, where we've got a few days before flying home. Actually, it's been really nice to come back to the start line. As I record this, I'm actually standing exactly where we started the race just over a week ago, standing on the exact spot where my board was half in the water in the Yukon. The difference being is I'm standing here this time, not with my paddleboard, but I'm holding the Yukon 1000 coin that we were given when we finished 1,000 miles further up this river. It's quite crazy standing here now and watching the river flow and thinking this is where it all started. And what an epic adventure. I'm still trying to process a lot of it mentally. Physically, personally, I'm good, all things considered. Some nerve damage in my fingertips, which I was told would happen. It's quite common. So I can't really feel things when I touch things, but each day feels like it's getting better. My feet, feet swelled like sledgehammers. And when we finished the race, didn't have much feeling in my feet, but that's gradually coming back now as well, and the swelling's going down. a bit of sunburn on the feet, which did my best to manage while paddling. But other than that, physically, yeah, no niggles or injuries. I reckon I've probably lost about 5 or 6 kilograms. It's pretty impossible to consume anywhere near what you are expending on something like this. I've sort of had a casual look at my stats. I will analyse my Garmin data, no doubt, more in detail when I get back to the UK, because that's the kind of thing I like to do. But yeah, it's we were expending probably 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day, and you can't realistically really bring any more than 2 to 3k of calories in while paddling, just half it, just because of the logistics of trying to carry that much food for a period of time and trying to eat and consume it while paddling. But yeah, that's all good. The race itself, I mean, a quick overview. When we started, Skip and I went out with the intention to get across that lake first. There's a saying, or there's a kind of thing that most teams go to the first. So whoever crosses the lake first, generally, unless you mess up, generally stays in front. You've got a bit of an advantage in as much as you're out in front. You're not trying to play catch up, and if you play the right game, you can just keep ahead of everyone. We got a lake across. First day we did 135k, which included the lake, which is the slowest part. The lake, we were very lucky. We had no terrible weather. We had no big waves. It was just a very light tailwind, but it was a slog. I think it took us about 8.5 hours to get across that lake. But by that point, we'd lost sight of the other SUP team, so we kind of just kept our heads down and kept cracking on. Yeah, and from there on, it was an epic adventure. Very hot in the day, so lots of cooling down in the river. We were actually quite surprised how long it took the kayaks and canoes to catch us. I mean, they do leave obviously a day later than us, and they're not the people we're racing. But it's actually quite fun to see how far you can get before the first team gets you. You feel a little bit like a sort of hare and the hound. And we were the first team through Dawson, so we passed through Dawson, which really surprised us. That's the halfway point, so we got past there before anyone caught us. And the team of the Estonian girls team, who were absolutely smashing it out of the park and ultimately went on to win the race, they passed us just before Eagle, the border crossing into Alaska. And every team that come through was like just commending us for being fast, and commenting on just how crazy fast we'd been. And obviously being up front as well, you also get intel from teams coming through on where your competition is. So we had a good inkling that we had built up quite a big gap. Teams were coming past saying they'd passed the other SUP team a day or two previous. So we knew they weren't right on our tail. So then it was down to just managing the remaining days, making sure we were on the water for 18 hours a day, not letting that slip. We knew we could be a bit more cautious with some of the route. When you get up into the flats, there are potential shortcuts that can save time, but the risk is with the water levels, you might take a shortcut and then suddenly find that it's not deep enough and you have to start dragging your boards and you can lose hours. So we made a decision to be cautious and just take the obvious natural flow of the river rather than trying to take any shortcuts. So we did slow up a little bit in the last half of the race just because we were doing that. But that was fine with us, so that was good. The river and the area just changes after Dawson. You really do feel like you've fallen off the edge of the earth. It's really hard to explain just how vast and huge, how small you feel. You feel just, you are just a mere speck on the landscape, and there's not a human for tens and hundreds of miles around. And you're walking on untouched land, and it's mental. And it could freak people out, to be honest. I mean, you have to really keep your wits about you and be mindful of the situation you're in, because anything goes wrong, no one's coming to get you. But that was exciting, and it kept us on our toes. Got into the flats. The flats are horrific. The flats are it's 2 days you're in the flats, and it's just so vast and huge and flat, and it's really hard to read the current. You're trying to follow the current, and you're getting stuck in places, and it just goes on and on and on. But we sort of cracked on through that, and we finished the race in 8 hours. 8 days. Which we did finish it in 8 hours. We finished the race in 8 days. It was 13 hours and 5 minutes. So, so happy with that. we're over the moon. It was fantastic to get to that finish line, and it was fantastic to see that every single team finished within the cut-off. We were really concerned for Martin and Kim when we finished, because the organisers told us that they were at risk of not making the cut-off, and that would be the worst thing possible for them, because they've absolutely hammered that course, and we know what they went through, having gone through it ourselves. But they pulled it out of the bag on the last day, and they obviously dug deep and pulled it through and made the cut-off, which was fantastic. So to say we've had 2 teams from the UK, the first ever UK SUP team to enter the Yukon 1000, both finish the race, is incredible, and hopefully that goes on to inspire other SUP races that might want to consider doing something like this. But I think hopefully once I've processed everything a little bit more, we can have a more detailed chat on everything. But for now, thank you to SUPfm, thank you to everyone that's followed us along, everyone that's watched the trackers, everyone that's left comments on Facebook, on social media. We do promise to catch up on all messages and reply to everyone, share photos, videos, and try and bring what we've seen and done over the last 8.5 days into something that might help people understand just what it's like to paddle 1,000 miles in the last frontier. Thanks again, Simon. Thanks everyone. And catch up soon. Bye.
We'd like to thank Baltic Life Jackets for returning as episode sponsors this season. Baltic designed and developed their SUP Elite PFDs to solve 2 key problems facing stand-up paddlers. The slimmed-down front panel makes it easier to climb back on your board, and the ergonomic cutaways around the arms accommodate the SUP stroke, allowing you to paddle freely without restriction to the point that you hardly notice you're even wearing it. The SUP Elite also incorporates storage and the option to add a hydration pack, which is perfect for the summer. So check out the SUP Elite and the SUP Pro PFDs at your local stockist or at supfmpodcast.com/Baltic. Looking to take your performance to the next level? Then look no further than Ocean Pacific. Introducing the Strike Series VRX, the ultimate SUP paddle designed for maximum power and efficiency. Its firm flex shaft optimizes energy transfer for efficient paddling. Its double dihedral blade ensures an unrivaled grip on the water, boosting your surfing, racing and touring performance. Ocean Pacific sponsors and promotes UK surf and race culture, supporting athletes and adventure racing teams, including the Shack team competing in this year's Yukon 1000. And they're committed to providing professional grade equipment at an accessible price. Visit oceanspacific.com today to explore their range of high performance paddles, hardware and apparel. And the links to all of our sponsors are in the show notes.